All right, welcome in to another episode of Buzz Beat. Tonight, I'm Brian Geisinger. I'll be joined on our draft night day one recap pod by James and Darian. It was an eventful night in the NBA, busy night in the NBA, and certainly a busy night for the Charlotte Hornets. I think we should start at the most sort of obvious place, something we talked about a little bit earlier tonight, James, with Spencer Percy when we put out our sort of like live reaction pod that went out to Buzzbeat Plus subscribers with what the Hornets did with the fourth overall pick, which was selecting Kon Knueppel. But before we get into that, I do want to see how you got check in, see how you guys are doing. So I'll send it to you, Darian. Welcome to draft night audio recordings here. How are you doing, man?
I am doing good. I liked our first pick. Our second pick, I'm a little, weary about. Hopefully, you guys can make me feel better. But I feel like it does gives us some type of direction. So I'm excited for that. Finally, getting shooters in a system that requires shooters. So I really can't complain on that aspect.
James, how about you? How have the last few hours been since we last spoke?
I mean, I'm high on life right now. It's 4:49 a.m. The Hornets have got my third ranked, my 18th ranked player with picks 4 and 29. They've got a future first round pick for Mark Williams, which you might touch on briefly as well. I know people are gonna look at this and be like, they've got two white guys who might struggle defensively and might not be able to play together in the first round of the draft. But like when you're the Hornets, you can't really worry about that. Like I don't think you're drafting the 29th pick to start alongside Kon Knueppel. I know people are going to go straight. I really like the overall. This team needed better spacing, and it has got that. And they've got, probably not like all-star upside players. Like the very top level of Kon might be that. But like they are guys who know how to play off others. And like we say, Charles Lee's system, this team got up a lot of threes last year. They didn't always have the guys who were able to convert them. I think they're going to have that. How they're able to patch together a defense, that's going to be an interesting one. But overall, I've really liked the process in this draft night, and like compared to last year, I'm feeling much better about where the Hornets went.
Yeah, we can talk about McNeely a little bit more in a second, but I just think for me it was sort of like a value play. This is a guy that preseason is probably a top 10 pick. Only plays in 27 games with UConn this season. That a team that had a fair amount of roster turnover, and then obviously he dealt with the high ankle sprain that cost him several games, sort of like in the meat of the season. Only shot 31% from deep this year, but 37% from off the catch. 6'7" movement shooter. Certainly like an interesting piece to add to that. We can get to McNeely maybe a little bit more in a second. I do sort of want to start with Kon. We've talked about Knueppel a lot.
Better than last year when it was still on.
Yeah.
And no one had talked about him at all, right? At least our listeners should feel informed and prepared for Kon Knueppel, right? Like we're not having to be like, so there's this guy. So a pat on the back to ourselves there, right? I feel like we really kind of nailed our Kon coverage. And look, my two big takeaways with it is one, the public kind of like smoke out there was accurate for once about Charlotte's interest in Kon Knueppel, which is interesting. And two, Kon Knueppel said in his like post-media availability, he was like, after I had my visit to Charlotte, like I had a really good feeling about landing there, which is kind of code for like he knew, and I know that they worked Kon out pretty early in the draft cycle. He was one of the first guys who came in after the combine. So the fact that they probably felt pretty comfortable on this for a while here. So it seems like it's been leading this way for a while.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, super competitive player, malleable player, guy that can fit in. I mean, any team could use someone like Kon with his shooting and feel for the game, his passing, and as we touched on earlier too, like and have also noted during our Kon coverage the last few weeks, like is a guy that I think the limits that have been sort of like put on his ceiling by some people are like way overstated. I actually think this guy has quite a bit of upside and potential. I think he's going to be a very good offensive player. Darian, we did not get to talk to you earlier after the Knueppel pick went live. Just your thoughts sort of on how the first, I guess, maybe four picks of the draft played out. I think, it seemed like it was pretty much went according to plan with the roadmap. But how do you feel about Kon in the end? Were you happy to see Knueppel heading to Charlotte as opposed to Trey Johnson or Ace Bailey?
I actually like the pick. My biggest thing was, as I've mentioned, I just felt like I didn't know if the Hornets were ready to take a player like Kon, and I feel like that has nothing to do with Kon, so that's not necessarily a fair evaluation for him. But I just didn't feel as though we were ready. But at some point, you do need these guys. So if they felt like he was the best available player for them, then by all means, go get him. And as you mentioned, I think that a lot of people think that Kon is Liam McNeely. Like they're like, oh, he just could shoot, or because Liam McNeely is more of the Corey Kispert than Kon would be to me. And even then, that's not even that close of a comparison. But I think that Kon is a lot better than people give. I know I was someone that said that, I like Trey Johnson and his upside more, but that's not to say that I don't like Kon's upside. I think he's already a really good player. I think he's already, jumped the hierarchy of other Hornets players. I think there's a lot of things he can do. He makes our LaMelo less minutes not look so bad. I like his playmaking. I like how solid he is on defense. I like that he is also able to slow down the game when driving to the rim. I think that's something we lack. We're just go, 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 go. We don't really have those players to like slow down and draw the foul, which is something we really struggle with. So he does a lot of those like smart things, and then he plays perfectly off LaMelo Brandon. I think he mentioned that in like a little questionnaire I saw him have after he got drafted. So I actually like the pick. I would like to see like what New Orleans or the Nets were offering, but still, I think Kon's a good pick.
Yeah, I like it. James, all I know we're all juggling a few different things at the same time here, but James, your thoughts sort of on how maybe this is too early to put it out there, but sort of what role do you expect Kon to have next season? I would imagine, coming off the bench to begin, but I would also imagine spending most of the season in Charlotte. And maybe some thoughts on ways that Charlotte could use him offensively and sort of feature him in ways.
Well, I think he could have the opportunity to start, especially if Josh Green is out at the start of the season. And that's like he's probably competing with Josh Okogie or Nick Smith Jr. for like a spot on the wing. Grant Williams out at the start of the year, so I wouldn't rule out him starting on this team. I mean, in terms of how they can use him. Look, I think firstly, you can run him. He's like by far the best kind of like movement shooter off screens. Like Brandon Miller is a great shooter. He's not exactly a guy who kind of like flies off screens and catches it in movement a ton. More of a spot up guy, more of a guy who kind of like catches and goes in transition. He did do a little bit of that, but he's just a lot bigger and probably isn't as able to like get around some of those tight curls. I think you can use him in a load of ghost screen actions as well, similar to how they used to use like Terry Rozier and Devontae Graham. Like he did that a ton at Duke of like, going in to set a pick for Proctor or flag and then kind of like flaring out. And when you have LaMelo Ball, we saw so often them like blitzing, putting two on the ball, and Kon Knueppel is just another release valve alongside Brandon Miller for that. And then also I think like you're probably going to have like your weaker defenders on Kon because you're going to put your primary guys on Brandon Miller, on LaMelo Ball. So if he's able to get like some more undersized point guards or shooting guards, I think he's also got enough strength and ability, whether it's like getting it into post-ups or getting him into mismatches and switches, and then maybe able to kind of like attack the rim and get to his 2-foot pivot game and finish on the inside. I think there's a lot of ways they can use him. I think the big thing for this can be like, how does he fit in defensively? Because he was a good defender this year at Duke. I like his motor and his smarts, but he is not super quick. He is not long. He's not athletic. And no matter how smart you are and how strong you are, there are limitations in the NBA, especially like when people are shooting over you and you're Kon. So like with Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, Kon Knueppel, like who is your best perimeter defender out of that? Who are you putting on, the opposing team's point guard? I think that's probably where some of the questions are. At the minute, I'd probably say it'd be Brandon Miller. And I think that was kind of like okay last year, but not at the level like you look at that OKC Indiana series. you've got like guys pestering the ball for like 40 yards up the court, and Charlotte don't have that yet.
Yeah, I think it has to be that role is going to end up being Brandon sort of by default. Another guy coming off an injury, and a guy that is certainly scheduled to have a pretty large offensive load too. So it's going to be a lot on his plate when Brandon does return to the lineup. I think you nailed it on some of the stuff with Kon. Like, I think his ability to work as a screener with LaMelo, the ghost screening actions in the half court when you're sort of like after the initial read or sort of like first two options haven't hit, then have Kon just sprint at LaMelo and slip out, or have him hold and set the screen. And you might be able to get a switch for LaMelo. You might be able to get a switch for Kon. Sort of like looking at a theme with both Kon and McNeely, this feels like two guys that the Hornets wanted, guys, not just shooting, but guys that have like high feel and make quick decisions with the ball. And so I think it seems to me like there was a priority of sorts put on that in terms of guys that they wanted to add to the roster. I certainly understand it because it's something they could use more of in the rotation, sort of having these kind of like snappy, quick decision makers who can shoot. And obviously a guy like Kon who might give you some like gravity bending movement shooting, coming off screening actions. I think Kon is like an off-ball screener to get setting back screens, to get Bridges a lob, or to get Brandon a lob. I think using him in floppy action with Brandon Miller is intriguing. Charles Lee didn't run a lot of like pistol action this year with LaMelo. They kind of flow into a lot of those sort of like double drag looks. That's a lot of their like early ball screen stuff flows into. I think you could try to like mix in some more pistol, and I think Kon could be a guy that could be really solid at those guard screening actions early in the offense, but also having him be, when you're running those double drag screens, having Kon be the first screener and then having the 5 be the second screener, then Kon's popping out, the 5's diving in, Brandon spacing to the corner. You've got LaMelo, dribbling with pace off of that, could really pressures the defense in multiple spots, and you've got kick out options for LaMelo, and it just, I don't know. I like how that like that template could really sort of like open the floor up for LaMelo. Darian, any thoughts sort of on Kon? Let's go back to his defense actually. How do you think he handles next season? I think he's a guy that can certainly play well in the system. But what is your level of concern with Kon as maybe a guy that's going to be playing a lot of perimeter defense in the NBA next season?
I'm concerned about it to an extent. I mean, and once again, I don't think it's necessarily all on him. When you draft Kon, I think you know what you're getting. So I believe it wouldn't be too fair to judge him strictly off his defense. But as James mentioned, I could see him being on just, other teams, like less valuable players as far as guys who just kind of sit in the corner and things like that. There are going to be switches, so you have to watch out for that. And we don't really have anyone to even replace that. I mean, the closest outside of Brandon would be Miles, which we know like his defense sometimes is on and off. So I have concerns in that matter, but it's hard for me to really dive into it or feel strongly about it because he's here for the shooting. I mean, it's there. He's going to show up and do what they drafted him to do. It's the Jeff Peterson and Charles Lee's job to an extent to help hide that. I don't think he's like a terrible defender to where he's just going to get destroyed. But obviously, the jump from college basketball to the NBA is going to be tough, adjusting to the size and the speed. But overall, I mean, I don't think he's just going to look terrible. So I feel like that just allows me to feel a little more comfortable about it and then really just focus on what he can do for us offensively.
Yeah, the offense, it's going to be just the thought of having Miller, LaMelo, Kon together. You've got 3 guys above 6'5" that can all dribble, pass, shoot. They can shoot coming off screens, on or off the ball, can shoot off the catch. Yeah, James, it seemed like maybe you're trying to hop in there. Any other thoughts about Kon?
I think big picture, the Kon pick, and we talked about this briefly, it shows to me a commitment from ownership in the front office around LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. I agree. We talked about this, right? If you went down the Trey Johnson route, the Ace Bailey route, like those guys didn't probably really fit as complementary guys alongside those two players. So this does I guess, make me think that, earlier in the summer, I was like leaning probably like over 50% that the Hornets might look to explore trading LaMelo Ball. I would dial that down now pretty significantly to like 15, 10%. And maybe Jeff Peterson wants to be like, hey, like we are, trying to get the best out of Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, who like, they are not guys who can just get to the rim against anyone, right? They need spacing because they're not incredible athletes. They're not incredibly finishing on the interior. They need guys around so that they have space to attack. Because when they have space to attack, they're both much better than when they're in a crowd. And we know LaMelo Ball is one of the most creative passers, finding guys to kick out to. The problem for him in recent years, he's been kicking out to, Cody Martin, Vasa Micic, T. John year. When he had Grant Williams out there, it made a real difference, and he got injured, and that really felt it. They lost that like release valve. This signals to me focusing on LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller for at least the next 12 months here.
Yeah. And I felt like early in the season, there was a specific game because I remember I was amazed by it, but I can't remember who was on the floor. I should have looked before I brought it up. But the offense was flowing with a bunch of shooters on the floor, the minimal amount of shooters we have. But I really wish I could remember what game. But LaMelo looked just really comfortable driving and kicking out or driving and creating space, and then that allowed other people to kind of move off ball, and it worked. I saw like a small quarter and a half of what Charles Lee is trying to do actually in fruition, except those guys just so happen to be hot that night. So adding McNeely, adding Kon to guys who are supposed to actually be able to just shoot, I think is going to look a lot better. And I think that, to James's point, if they saw that and saw that LaMelo is having success when we do surround him with people who aren't Micic, who aren't Nick Smith Jr., who aren't these other guys, then let's go ahead and buy into him now. Now, I don't know what that means for the next step of for what we do, but I do feel like it was probably the right step to make.
Yeah. Flanking LaMelo with two tall, like quick trigger shooters that can also like pass the ball too is not a bad setup at all. Depending on how Charlotte uses one of its second round picks on Thursday, plus depending on potentially also like the rehab of someone like Grant Williams when he gets back to the lineup, Charlotte can also put could potentially put some lineups on the court next season that have a lot of shooting. That all of a sudden they've got 5 guys that can sort of like threaten from beyond the arc. How viable are those on the other side of the court? We'll see. But you could see a scenario where they try something like Grant and they switch a lot, or at the 5 and they switch a lot. Bridges, Miller, Knueppel, LaMelo, like it's like a lot of like collective length and shooting that offensively could really could do some damage. All right. Any other loose thoughts on Kon? We've obviously talked a lot about him both tonight and certainly over the last few weeks, but overall consider myself rather happy with this pick for the Hornets. And again, the first 4 picks played out they played out exactly how I thought they would. And ultimately I'm pleased with what Charlotte did with a top 5 pick here. But yeah, any other thoughts from either of you two guys, James or Darian?
Yeah,
and Kon?
I think we should address some of the comments in the chat here. Okay. There's quite a feisty conversation going on here around like Juice Man says, I'm so sick of drafting for fit, not best available. And to that, I would say like they didn't draft for fit.
Yeah.
Like if you draft for fit, you wouldn't draft players who kind of play the same position with a relatively equal skill set. Probably have, drafted a center at 29 once you traded away Mark Williams. So I don't think they've drafted for fit. There's also someone else saying here, like, why are they drafting 3-point shooting? The Hornets were bottom 3 in the league last year for 3-point percentage. They were top half of the league for 3-point attempts. So they needed more shooting. I get the idea, right, that these are 2 3-point specialists and that's what they're going to be kind of like pinned down. But we aren't talking about Troy Daniels here or like JJ Redick.
Right.
Kon Knueppel is a guy who can get to the rim. He can handle the ball. He's an all-round player. He's not a 3-point shooting specialist. That might be his best skill early, but it is by no means his early skill. And same with Liam McNeely. He's like, I know like there's this typical thing, right? When we see like, 6'7" white guys, they're builder shooters, like everyone instantly has an idea of what is in their head. But like Liam McNeely plays with a physical edge, physical nastiness. Like he's a great rebounder, great defensive rebounder. He can get inside as like a floater finish as well. Played like the second half of the season with this high ankle sprain, which took away a lot of his juice, so because kind of limited to more jump shots. But I just don't want people out here thinking that we just draft two guys who are going to like wait in corners all night. That is absolutely not how these guys are going to be used in Charlotte.
I'll say that like if that's how the Hornets use them, then that's their fault. Like that's not how these guys should be used. There's a lot more to their game. Even on McNeely, who I'm not the highest on, I can see that if they just throw him in a corner, then they're not doing it right. They should have drafted him. So I would assume that there are other plans to create some type of 3-point shooting, because that's obviously what we're trying to do. So it's just a matter of getting those players and then developing into our system. That's kind of like the biggest thing.
I think Kon's because obviously both guys can shoot, but their ability to also help generate threes, and not in the the sort of like LaMelo Ball, just run pick and roll and bend the defense and kick it out or whatever, or skip it or whatever. But Kon's ability to screen or to slip, and then his ability to maintain advantages. So like, LaMelo runs a double drag pick and roll. He comes off of it. He's kicking to Kon catch and go, defense rotates, and then he's kicking it out to Brandon. Like, it's important to have guys like that to also help improve the blend and to continue to generate open catch and shoot threes. Ultimately, like that's what you're trying to do with the half court offense. And I don't think like a guy like Kon, I mean, he absolutely was a top 5 talent for this draft. So it's not like they to me, this is not like some sort of settle where they're just trying to get the most ready-made guy that can fit next to their core at the moment. The strategy, Charlotte is taking a much longer look than just how things fit next season. They're investing in these guys with much longer roadmaps, and they see a guy like Kon that can be, I think, a really important piece for them for the foreseeable future, and a guy that super competitive, good intangibles, good teammate, and I think that will also pair well with a guy like Brandon Miller too. So all right, any other thoughts? I had not been checking the chat all that much, but I can go back through here.
One more thing I would just want to add is that I feel like, for me, with this draft, I feel like there has to be other corresponding moves to go with it. I don't think like this is it. So I think that we'll see probably a philosophy change come 33, 34. We'll see a philosophy change come, in July when free agency is happening and more moves are being made. I think that if you're the Hornets, my idea would be you're getting shooting, but like at a cheaper deal than you would have to go into free agency where you're bidding against 20 other teams because everybody's trying to get shooting. I feel like this is your probably easiest way of trying to solidify that for your team. But that's just my idea. I think that's something they could do. But I don't think that like the next 2 picks are going to be anything like, Kon and Liam McNeely. I think it's going to be drastically different. And, obviously we probably still need a big, I saw somebody say something about transition scoring, which I think we do need more finishing inside, but I mean, there's still players there that can do all that. They obviously have intel that McNeely wouldn't be there at 33 or felt as though he might not be there at 33. So that's probably why they just went ahead and made the move. But whoever else they were probably considering could still be there at 33. It's just a matter of leveraging and trying to figure out what these other teams are trying to do.
We've got a comment here. This was from Hate Davis a few minutes ago. Hornets need to draft Kalkbrenner. He's a plug and play. Charles Lee drop center, pick and roll, pick and pop big. And then Fleming, who they want Tijon to be. Yeah, those are 2 guys that I would certainly have in consideration for picks tomorrow. I'm guessing Charlotte will use one of those on a center. And obviously a lot of centers went in the first round of this draft, including maybe a couple of guys that came off the board, relatively early.
Hanson Yang. What the
yeah,
hell,
wow.
Portland?
That was,
Wow.
Dean was crazy.
That was a big swing there for sure. I mean, the passing is really great, but he is
Mike Schmitz.
Yeah,
Reputation
from the
on the
top
line.
rope, from the top rope.
Absolutely.
Dude, so I have a question. Do you think, and I just saw this floating around from nobody of sources, but just like regular conversation, do you think that Charlotte looks at Portland's situation and looks to just grab one of their centers? I say for cheap, but just without giving a premium. I personally don't like really any of their centers. Well, I should say I don't think they're going to give up Donovan Clingan. Other than that, I personally am not too high on any of their centers, but that's a team that has a lot of centers that may be just trying to get rid of them at some point. You would think, at least.
It's a possibility if they're surveying the league, and I mean they have one former Portland center on the roster, so
Right.
maybe they could look for another one potentially. Wow, it really does feel like the Portland, Phoenix, Charlotte, like this nexus of trade activity the last 6-7 months or so has. It was active again tonight. We're not going to go all the way into the trade, but I just kind of do want to use this as a bit of it would be remiss to not mention it, and we can use this as a segue to maybe to talk a little bit more about Liam McNeeley, in part because we did not get to McNeeley much in the pre-draft process. But the Suns and the Hornets agreed to another transaction this week. The Suns traded the number 29 pick and a 2029 first-round pick. Now, that pick will be the least favorable of Cleveland, Utah, and Minnesota's first-round pick, protected 1 through 5. And that was in exchange for Mark Williams, who, his career in Charlotte, was a bumpy finish here the last few months, but Charlotte is able to get 2 first-round picks in for Mark Williams. Before we get to McNeely, we don't need to go too long into the Mark trade, but James, I'll throw it to you. What was your sort of just give me your instant reaction to the end of Mark Williams' tenure in Charlotte and what the Hornets got in return for their former first-round pick?
Well, firstly, good luck to Mark in Phoenix, because he's had a really tough last year and he's a super good kid. It's a shame it didn't work out in Charlotte. It kind of felt like it was really going to at some points, and injuries kind of got in the way of that. So best of luck to Mark. And it's one of the first guys I interviewed when I went over to the Las Vegas Summer League. So it's gonna miss Mark. Look, getting a gauge on his trade value was really difficult after the rescinded trade and the injury issues. Like it was no idea to really know what it's like, and to essentially get 2 first-round picks, if even one of them is going to be the 29th pick. But when you look at that and you get a guy like Liam McNeeley, who is kind of widely projected from 17 to 24 in the draft. So really is like a mid first-round pick in terms of value. That looks better already than probably when the trade was first made. And that 2029 first, I think it's the least favorable of Utah, Minnesota, and Cleveland. So probably not going to be a great pick, but you didn't have to take on any long-term salary. They had to take back Vasimicic, who they'll waive and probably agree with a buyout with pretty soon. So you not have to take on any long-term salary. It also frees up, I believe, I figured out, around $25 million in cap space next summer now, if Charlotte move on from Josh Okogie's cap hold. So with Mark Williams on the roster previously, his cap hold would have wiped all of that out. So it also gives them some additional flexibility. So I think it was a good deal, getting 2 firsts for a guy who, if you take the temperature of most national media analysts, they didn't really rate Mark Williams. They don't think he's a good defensive player. They think he's injury prone. And in a desperate situation where they needed us but couldn't really spend any money on someone. So a little bit like Lakers, the Hornets appear to have taken advantage of a team who kind of didn't have many options on the table. So overall, I think a good trade, and just gives them more future first round picks to maneuver and use as currency for future deals, which Charlotte are in a really, really strong place now. They got the future first from next year via, I think, probably Orlando. They got the future Dallas, future Miami first. They've now got this other 2029 first. They've really got a stockpile of picks that they can throw at a player when the right type of person comes up. So I was a fan of the trade. I think they needed to make a move at center this offseason. Like Williams, Nurkic, Diabate didn't really make much sense to keep all three, I didn't think. And Williams was always the most likely to be moved. But look, it's not a move that I think will make the Hornets better next year. Like this is a step back move or a sideways move at best, even for the most optimistic or negative people with Mark Williams. So I think it's right in line actually with what a lot of us expected. And when we did like our mock trades podcast before this, a lot of us talked about like moving Mark Williams for like a mid first and a Moses Moody, or a mid first and a couple of seconds. And that's not like a miles away from value. So it's kind of what I guess the approximate value would be, if not slightly better.
Yeah, I think 2 first-round picks in return for Mark. Again, if you had talked to me basically almost any day since the Lakers trade had been rescinded, I probably would have given you a different, approximation on what I thought Mark's trade value was. There were times where I was like, it's unfair to like talk about players like this, but it was like, is he just like, would they have to like actually attach something to move off of Mark? I think it's great that he came back and played well down the stretch. Ultimately had a pretty nice, third season when he was healthy, and was able to, again, sort of like reaffirm some of his trade value to get those 2 picks, and to get, like James noted, a little bit of added future flexibility, is not a bad return. So I covered Mark at Duke, covered him with the Hornets. I'm excited for him to get a fresh start out in the desert. And it is kind of amazing that like he will reunite with Nick Richards, and he will also be a teammate of Kaman Malawach, who those guys know each other through the Duke family, and is someone that, Kaman was comped to Mark probably more than most other players or any other player, heading into and out of the draft this season. So it's kind of it feels a little kismet to have all of those guys together out in the desert. Okay. Darian, why don't I would be remiss to not gauge you for just give me real quickly sort of like your initial read on the Mark transaction. I'm sure we'll have more coverage on this later in the
my initial reaction was just simply that it had to happen. I know you can technically bring Mark Williams back and pretend nothing happened, but in the reality of things, I just don't see how that would go. And I definitely didn't want to trade him for the sake of trading him. So I'm glad that we were able to get, basically 2 first-round picks. The only thing I think is really different from the trade with the Lakers is that we didn't get a Dalton Connect, but fine. That's really it. I really didn't want to pay him. I think he's very he produces well. Like he gives you you see the 2015 games, 2012 games sometimes, but I don't think he's highly impactful the way we would need him to be. So that's kind of like with Kaman, I felt as though Kaman is a more impactful center, as in he may not get the rebounds, he may not get the blocks, but you go back and look, he's deterring a lot of people in the rim. He's able to switch out and stop, how Mark and Nick Richards used to get killed in a 5-out. Not saying Kaman's often a perimeter defender, but I think it would have just been a little less likely as he matures and grows as a player. So yeah, that's kind of just my thing with Mark. I liked how much he was able to produce, but I just didn't feel like it was truly impactful. So it just was a matter of time.
Yeah, I think this was sort of they'd been on the clock with this since the Lakers trade was nullified. So in the end, they ends up giving them a late first round pick this year, the 29th pick. We've talked a little bit about McNeely already, but a former McDonald's All-American, was a consensus top 10, top 15 prospect in the 2024 class. It's kind of interesting to think about because Cooper Flagg decided between Duke and UConn. And in the fall of 2023, he commits to Duke. He was also prep teammates at Montverde with Liam McNeeley. There's some other reality where Cooper Flagg goes to UConn. The Huskies are a Final Four team. Liam McNeeley doesn't roll his ankle, and he looks like Kon Knueppel next to Cooper Flagg.
There is,
season. Maybe there's something like that. To me, the value play was significant because McNeely preseason was talked about like kind of like how we would talk about Kon Knueppel or Trey Johnson now. Like he was the top movement shooter coming into this class. So like Charlotte has been scouting and thinking about this guy since before he set foot in stores, right, and suited up for the Huskies. He's a guy that's absolutely been on their radar for several years now. I'm certain they saw him play in EYBL and with Cooper Flagg and Derek Queen and Ace Newell at Montverde. So I think the value play is really, really enticing here. James, as the Hornets are approaching the 29th pick late in the first round, you know, you're seeing the picks countdown. Brooklyn's doing their thing. The Boston Celtics get Hugo Gonzalez, which was a nice pick. I like that for them.
Yeah.
Heading into the 29th pick, were you maybe leaning towards McNeely? Was there someone else on your board that was maybe grabbing your attention a little bit more? And sort of, you know, now that we're, you know, I don't know, an hour or so out from that pick, how are you feeling with how things played out?
Well, just quickly on McNeely. The year is 2030. Cooper Flagg's coming to the end of his rookie contract. Who's to say that he doesn't want to leave Dallas? Okay, take the qualifying offer, reunite with college teammate Kon Knueppel and high school teammate Liam McNeely. So that's what I'm pushing for here.
The recruiting pitch starts now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get Sion James in the second round as well, so that we can add a third trifecta there. Just on Liam McNeely shooting, everyone will see that 32% number, which is a little scary for a guy dubbed as a shooter. His 3-point percentages from above the break, left wing 45%, right wing 56%, top of the 3-point arc 45%. Then the right corner shot 83%. You're thinking, where's this going? Left corner went 1 for 11, shot 14%. And that's dragged down all his overall percentages. Like for me, that is just a statistical anomaly. The fact that he shot 45% or better above the break is a pretty significant suggestion there. That's some untapped shooting potential. Look, as the 29th pick edged closer, it's no surprise to anyone who's been following me. I was holding my fingers for Noah Pender. Like, my 11th ranked prospect, and I thought like could actually fit really nicely with Kon Knueppel with some like on-ball defense, which I think the Hornets team probably lacks now. Although there are some rumors that he's going to be like a draft and stash guy overseas, so maybe that's why he's more likely to go in the second round. But McNeely was 18th on my board, so if it wasn't Pender, like McNeely was the next guy, and after that there's quite a drop to like 24th, 25th guy on my board. So even though like I say, the fit isn't ideal next to Kon, and that could be a little bit of a challenge in summer league. Like in the NBA, I don't think it's going to matter. I think it's just a perfectly good upside talent play. And everyone will talk about him being a shooter. The first thing people talk about when you hear about Liam McNeely is him being like a fiery competitor, like an ultimate pro competitor. And again, that's just the type of player the Hornets are looking for. They're not looking for 3-point shooters necessarily outright. They're looking for guys who can maximize others, who understand their role, who have a professional approach, who are going to maximize what they can be. And I think Liam McNeely and Kon Knueppel are both guys who will do that. So I'm a huge fan of the pick. This is like one of my favorite Hornets drafts in a number of years. Like to get the 3rd and 18th ranked guy on my board at 4 and 29 is a home run. So pressure is on now for my own analysis, because if this doesn't work out, I've got some questions to answer.
Well, you were one of many that had McNeely coming in tonight, like pretty safely as like a top 20 prospect. But yeah, James, thoughts on McNeely? Or pardon me, not James.
Darian.
Jesus. Darian, it's late.
I can go again. I can give you more thoughts.
Yeah, Beck, do it again. Darian, I'm interested in your thoughts on Liam McNeely.
I like Liam McNeely. Like James said, he is definitely the competitor, and those are the kind of players I like. Normally, any other year, I would have been like, give me VJ and then like someone else like that. Those are the kind of players I like. Not to say McNeely's like VJ, but I like that competitive edge in any basketball player. It doesn't really matter to me what their other archetype is. But for McNeely, it was just weird just because everything I was told going into like my analysis of him was that he's a shooter. And then I didn't really see it, but I did see like his shot looks good. I think that some of the times he was just rushed. And it just he didn't feel like he was that comfortable at UConn. Now, some of that was because of injury. Some of that was just the conference. I think a lot of things just played into that. So I would really wonder. I'm glad you brought up like if Cooper went to UConn, like how would McNeely look? Because I do think it would have made a drastic difference. I just felt like he was never really able to get flowing in the offense the way someone like maybe a Jordan Hawkins was a couple years ago, where the way they used him off ball. So that was kind of like my biggest like concern. But in conference play, he shot better. I mean, not that much better, but he shot better, shooting 35%. So it gives you hope, especially like I said, when you watch the film. I have hope in him being a shooter, and definitely he's a better rebounder than I anticipated. So I think that's all good because still for the Hornets, we team rebound. I know we're supposed to have we don't have we even with Mark and Nick Richards, sometimes they would go games where they would just get 5, 6 rebounds, and then Miles Bridges has like 14. So as a team, we need everybody to be able to rebound until we figure out the center position. So I think he adds to that. And I really for me, the biggest thing I like about McNeely is that I do feel like he's better than, once again, the other, like the bottom part of our roster. And in building a team that's going to compete, whether that is for the playoff spot, championship, whatever, you need that bottom level of your roster matters. I think people think those are just throwaway players, but we saw with OKC how Isaiah Joe played a big part for them in certain parts of the season when guys were hurt, guys just weren't hitting. He could come in and hit a quick three pointers, and then that kind of dwindle off in the playoffs, but still having that throughout the season is what makes a good team. So I'm not saying he should be a bench warmer, especially taking him at 29. But at the same time, I feel as though he adds. We're not playing DaQuan Jeffries anymore. We're not playing these other guys, and so that's kind of really what I appreciate, because even though he may not be everything right now, I do see the upside, and I feel like by the time he's DaQuan Jeffries age, he's going to be better than DaQuan Jeffries. So having that on your roster may not be saying much, but I think it elevates. And that's really what we're trying to do right now, is elevate. I can understand swinging for the fences because that's kind of like the mentality I had after only winning 19 games. But at the same time, you have to do this at some point. This kind of draft, whether it be these players or not, it was going to come. Whether it be next year, the year after, at some point you were going to have to draft guys who, if your main guy's not hurt, the rest of the roster just falls apart. And I think Kon more so than McNeely, but I think Kon and McNeely have a big part in that.
Yeah. So first off, a little bit older for a one and done guy, sort of similar to Kon. Like he'll turn 20 in October. Comes from like Kon as well, comes from a basketball family, right? Just under 6'7", 6'8" and a half inch wingspan. Just not like crazy, obviously, especially for a wing. But his compete level, his physicality, his overall balance are quite good. His ability to come off of screens, his ability to shoot it from distance off screens, the ability to curl, the ability to make passing reads off of those actions. Darian, you mentioned his rebounding ability. This season, just under 19% defensive rebound rate, and during Big East play, almost 20% defensive rebound rate. Was top 10 in the league. And look, he got some of those rebounds off of missed free throw attempts, but still 4.2 rebounds per game off of missed field goal attempts. So not just getting cheapies in the lane. That ranked in the 90th percentile nationally. So physical, good size, can shoot, competitive, high field player. Yeah, I feel like there was a certain theme that the Hornets were going for here, and then just with McNeely and Knueppel, and then just the value play. Like, he's probably not the guy I would have had atop my board as they were coming to the 29th pick. Like, I really like Noah Penda, similar to James. But we'll see. Some of these guys are still going to be available tomorrow early in the second round, and to possibly snap up a guy like McNeely, another shooter with some size and competitiveness and good feel for the game, and like a good team defender. It makes it does make a lot of sense. And again, just the value play is another little bit of a bonus. Guys, any other thoughts on McNeely?
I don't think so. I think let's both each give maybe one guy that we would like the Hornets to take tomorrow in the second round. It feels now like really unlikely they keep both of those picks, especially like bringing 4 rookies into training camp feels unlikely to me. I think that would be a mistake personally. So I think they'll keep maybe one of the picks. Maybe if we just go around here and give like one guy who each of us want. Now, I've already talked about Noah Pender a lot, so I'm not going to pick Noah Pender. I am going to go... I'm going to go Ryan Kalkbrenner. I'm torn between him and Maxime Reynaud, but like they don't really have a big shot blocker on this roster now. With Nurkic in, with Moussa Diabate in, and Kalkbrenner is just like a big drop center defensive guy. But they could do with that kind of like rim protector on this team going forward here for like a period of time. Just someone like Diabate and Nurkic could be a little bit unstable for an NBA rotation. I think Kalkbrenner would bring a level of professionalism there. And hey, look, let's make it just 3 white hours out of 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is certainly going to get some comments, I imagine. It's just by chance these things happen. So I'm going to say Ryan Kalkbrenner, I think, would be a smart move. That's going to be my pick. Darian, I'm going to pass it over to you. Who's one guy you would like them to come away with in the second round tomorrow?
I was going to say Maxime Reynaud, but just because you touched on him briefly, I'll just go to Adou Thiero. One thing I will say is just that I feel like we need that physicality, and since we have had that development staff, I would like to see them try to develop him into something. Because right now it's just athlete. This is kind of what I see. I see how it works in college. Obviously, we see it time and time again, and then they come to the NBA and it doesn't necessarily translate. I would like to see not only them just mold him into being a good player, but I would like to see what kind of role they foresee that being. Because right now, it's not like he's a great shooter, not like he's that great at finishing. So there's parts of his game that needs to be tinkered with a lot. But at the end of the day, I feel like the potential's there. Second round pick. I will say it might depend on just what we're hearing going into day 2, but that's kind of like my big. And also right now, I think Miles would probably be the next piece you see moving. Not that Thiero's Miles, but you need someone to kind of fill that role. We're missing Grant already. I think that he would just be a good player to have.
Yeah. I could wax poetically about Reynaud for a while. It's a guy that I've really enjoyed covering this season in the ACC. I do just want to mention this name. I don't imagine this to be someone that's on the board for the Hornets, just given his position at need. But we haven't talked about Javon Small out of West Virginia much at all. Smaller guard, 6'1", 190, but his ability to create advantages, the pull up, the step back shooting, the ability to get into the paint, his ability to make decisions as like an off ball guard and connector, and then a pretty underrated finisher in many ways, a guy that like has the ability to score from multiple levels on the court. An older guard, 4-year player, but his ability to get to the rim, his ability to finish at the rim, and the sort of like step back pull up shooting ability that he has is pretty good. 5.9 rim attempts per 100 possessions this season, 62% at the rim, 88% from the line, 35% from deep on 12.5 3-point attempts per 100 possessions. So look, I think the Hornets are going to be looking wing and 5, if assuming at these picks, and I probably would prioritize some of the names we've mentioned before this, but did want to get Javon Small out there. He's a guy that I think he's gathered some steam as a prospect, at least sort of like in the online draft space, and a guy that I really enjoyed watching a lot of film of Small recently. So one more name I just wanted to toss out there, though I would project the Hornets would be much more so in the business of Kalkbrenner, Reynaud, Thiero, some of these other guys. So, all right, guys, James, it's incredibly late or early where you are. I don't know if you need to get up and get the tea kettle rolling. I'm not sure how that goes, but thank you guys for being a part of a long night of draft coverage here. This was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to reading and listening to any other stuff you guys put out over the next few days, and looking forward to, I guess, doing some draft 2 coverage as well, as the second round could potentially be an eventful one for the Hornets. So everyone who listened live or listens to on the pod tomorrow morning, we really appreciate you. Thank you for tuning into all of our draft coverage the last few months. Keep tuning in. Take care. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and go Hornets.